Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Getting back to work on the Cobra in this video. Last video I wrapped up the underneath of the engine and the front of the engine. This video it's going to be time to get to work on the back of the engine and start looking into installing the whole remainder of the drivetrain, clutch, flywheel, and transmission. So that being said, I'm going to go ahead and get the camera turned around and get back to work. Real quick before I get started working on the Cobra, at the end of my videos, I tend to mention some items that I have available for sale, and I want to take a quick moment to show you one of such items. These are all available through my Teespring store, and I decided to go ahead and order some items so I could at least show you what is out there. What I'm wearing right now is the Comfort tee that is available in multiple colors, and then there are multiple other items available with this photo on them, as well as some other photos related to the Cobra, Jeep, MR2, and some of the other vehicles or items that I'm interested in. So if you want to check it out, there should be a link to the store in the description of this video, as well as a link to the specific item. I do appreciate you watching, and time to get back to work. So first thing I'm going to be addressing in this video is the pilot bearing in the back of the crankshaft. There is currently a roller one in there, but I am going to be installing a new one because, again, don't know the age and mileage on what is in the vehicle. And in order to do that, you do need a specialty tool. I mean, there's some tricks and stuff out there, such as putting bread in the hole and hammering it, but I'm just going to use the proper tool. You can go to many of the local auto parts stores. I went to AutoZone. You basically buy the tool, use it, return it, get your full money back. It's free rental. You really can't beat that. So instead of spending all the money to own this, you're not going to use it very often. So you have the actual bearing puller itself right there. This goes on the back of a slide hammer. You tighten it down, this expands, it fills in the gap. There's like two little notches in the pilot bearing I'll show you when I go to remove it. You expand it so it's tight in the pilot bearing, and then you screw the slide hammer into the back of it, give it a couple whaps, it'll pull the bearing out. So that being said, I'm going to get under the car and walk you through the removal of the old pilot bearing. All right, so under the car, and you can see the pilot bearing here. So what you need to do is put the tool in the center here. You'll expand it by twisting the back, and the teeth will grab on the inside of the bearing, and then we'll hook the slide hammer up and yank the bearing out. All right, there you can see the tools in place. I've made sure to get the jaws past the bearing itself, and then again screwed the back in to get it nice and tight, so it's pretty snug in there. So now I'll just screw the slide hammer into the back of the tool and pop the bearing out. All right, well, sometimes you will find that the bearing does not want to cooperate, and you just pull the center out of the whole bearing. As you can see here, the outer shell is still there. It pulled the center out. So here is the new bearing, and what you need to do then is just remove the puller from the center. And if you look on the back side of the new bearing, there are two notches on each side. Just need to get the puller reinstalled and get the teeth hooked behind those two notches, and then you can pull the remaining shell out. All right, as you can see, the tool is reinstalled into those two recessed notches. So now I'm going to go ahead, hook the slide hammer back up to it, and get the remainder of the pilot bearing removed. All right, and there you have it, part A and part B of the old pilot bearing. This is what I was talking about as far as just getting it seated in those notches so you can get it removed. So pretty straightforward. Now I can go ahead and take this tool back to the part store. All right, and here is the bearing that's going to go in its place. National bearings, here's the part number, made in the USA. I'm going to go ahead and just grab a socket that'll fit against this outer edge here. It's the right size. I'll put a little grease around this side and just hammer it in. Similar to the front main seal, it's going to be best if you have a heavier, harder hitting hammer to just kind of drive this in so it doesn't fight you on its way. So like I said, go ahead and lube it up and hammer it in with an installer or a socket that is the right size for this outer flange. All right, and new bearing installed. Again, I did use that 10-pound sledge just to really hammer it home, and you'll know when it's bottomed out because the pitch will change. As you're hitting it, you'll know it all of a sudden gets a solid thud. So there it is in place, new pilot bearing. Next is going to be the rear main seal. All right, and here is the rear main seal I'm using. This kit has like a little guide to walk it over the crank and make sure you don't damage the seal. So you just go ahead, slide it in place, and then slightly tap it into home. You can get a sealer installer that goes around the outer perimeter. I found that if you're just gentle with the way you tap it in with a hammer, it should go in without a problem and you won't damage the seal. So I'm gonna go ahead and get this installed. All right, real quick, I put a thin film of oil on the inside here because this is where it's gonna sit on the back of the crank, as well as on the outside of that lip, so that when you're walking the seal through, it has a slick of oil that it's going over. You can see the sheen on there. That'll put a little bit of oil between the seal itself and the crank itself, between this part touching the crank and that part, the seal walking over. So just a heads up on that. All right, and there you can see the rear main seal is installed. What I did, like I said, I used that little sleeve to get it started, and then using a hammer lightly tapped around it. And then I used a socket extension, and then that gives you a flat where you can kind of cover both the seal and the back of the block to get it where it is flush all the way around, and you'll feel that it is seated where you want it to be. So that is rear main installed. Next is going to be the flex plate, well, not flex plate, the spacer plate that goes on the back of the block between the block and the flywheel. All right, so I dug out my spacer plate, and as you can see, I definitely need to clean it up still. It's got all kinds of material over it, or all over it from the old clutch. I also went ahead and grabbed the flywheel bolts, which you can see there. I'm just going to reuse the originals. I did wipe them down, clean them up a little bit. Those will need sealer, which you can see the thread sealer next to them, because those bolt holes in the crank they go through the crank, so oil can get on the threads and leak out. So you want to make sure you seal those. But anyway, first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and try and wipe down and clean up this spacer plate first, and then I can go ahead and get it installed on the back of the block, and then it will be time to mount the flywheel. All right, and looking a lot better on both sides. I went over it initially with some brake clean, and then went ahead and just wiped it down with a couple of the Tubbo Towel shop rags, and much happier, a lot less dirty. So I'm gonna go ahead and get this mounted on the back of the block. Just for reference, this is the big hole that the starter goes through. This goes on the passenger side in case you are curious. So this is obviously the transmission side of the plate, and this is the engine side. The little angle there on the bottom, that will be on the very bottom of the plate, that kicks towards the back. So just in case you're curious. So I'm gonna go ahead and get this mounted up on the dowel pins, and then it'll be time to start the flywheel. All right, so next up is the flywheel, and right here you see the original that was removed from the car. And as I said previously, an aluminum Fidanza is going in its place. So what I'm gonna do is get a weight of the original and then weigh the Fidanza just to show the difference. All right, and there is the weight of the stock one, it was just shy of 21 pounds. Let me grab the Fidanza and get a weight on that. All right, and here's the Fidanza flywheel, as well as the 50-ounce weight and the 3 retaining bolts that I have to install on the back. Let's see what it weighs. All right, and there it is, just shy of 12 pounds. So I believe it was just shy of 21 pounds when it was the stocker. So yeah, pretty good weight savings right there. Definitely happy with this choice. All right, so next thing with the flywheel that I need to do is install the counterweight. And again, I need the 50 ounce, which is the bigger one. You'll see it's notched and everything to perfectly fit over the retainers for the front, the friction ring. And then you've got the 3 holes, and it comes with 3 bolts. It doesn't give you any instructions as far as torque or anything. You get the 3 bolts, and you get like a permanent Loctite tube. And looking at what the thread pitch is on these, it's the same as the bolts that are in the timing cover. And I think those are like 12 to 18 foot-pounds. I am going to go ahead and put thread sealer, or the permanent thread locker on them. I'm just gonna shoot for 20 foot-pounds. Hopefully they don't break, and call it a day. So I'm gonna go ahead and get this plate installed. All right, there it is. The 50-ounce weight is installed. And again, I used the 3/16 Allen socket thread locker, and I was able to torque it to 20 foot-pounds. All right, back under the car, and as you can see, I have the flywheel loosely mounted up. Fords are kind of funny. You can kind of tell in this picture, they don't have a perfect bolt pattern. There's a certain spacing. So what you'll have to do is put the flywheel on the back of the crank and then spin it until you find the right spot where all the holes line up in the flywheel and the crank. I have one kind of like hand tightened all the way down, and then the other are loose just to make sure everything went in its holes properly. So all set there. So next on the list, I'm going to put a couple bolts in the flywheel, and then I can put a pry bar on it or a breaker bar just to kind of hold the thing from spinning, using some of the outer holes. And then these need to be thread sealed, so I'm going to use the ARP thread sealer here because, like I said before, oil can come through the holes. So I'm going to put sealer on these one by one, and then they get torqued to 85 foot-pounds. 75 to 85 foot-pounds. I'm just going to go straight for 85. All right, 6 bolts are in, they're sealed, and they're hand snugged. And I forgot to mention, I do these in kind of like you're doing a wheel, where it'll be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Just do a cross star pattern just to make sure everything seats properly. Now I'm gonna go grab the torque wrench and knock them down to 85 foot-pounds. All right, and next thing you need to do is get some acetone and a rag and go ahead and remove all of the green paint that was on the surface of the friction plate just to keep it protected. There's still a little more I have to remove now that I'm seeing it with a little more light from the camera. So I'm gonna go ahead and go over it one more time, and then it will be time to mess with the clutch. All right, so next up is gonna be the clutch, and here you can see my original clutch and the weight. I'm sure there's not gonna be a big difference here, but I at least wanted to check. So here is the stock, I believe, King Cobra clutch I pulled out. Let me grab my new SPEC clutch that's going in. All right, and here is my SPEC Stage 2 Plus disc and pressure plate. So pretty close, not that far off, a little bit lighter, but yeah, within the same ballpark. All right, so I did go over the flywheel one more time with a little bit of acetone, and then followed it up with some brake clean to make sure it's good and clean. Next, I'm going to take the disc with the mounting tool, get that installed into the back of onto the flywheel, get the pressure plate mounted, and then get torqued into place. I will go ahead real quick and just wipe down the pressure plate with some cleaner as well. I mean, it didn't look like it was bad, but better be safe than sorry. And then the bolts, I believe they go 18 to 24 foot-pounds. Again, just kind of do a star pattern, and I normally do like a couple turns at a time, working my way around, just so I don't warp anything in the pressure plate. So just take your time and just kind of slowly work them down bit by bit until you get to the point where they're pretty snug, and then you can go ahead and torque them. Like I said, I'm gonna go 24 foot-pounds. All right, so here you can see I've got the disc in place on the flywheel with the retainer tool in. The raised center section is going to go inside of the pressure plate. Think of it that way. So that'll go towards the transmission. The flattest portion goes up against the flywheel. So I'm going to go grab the pressure plate and start getting the bolts started. All right, and there it is. Everything is installed and torqued down to 24 foot-pounds. Like I said, I did the star pattern, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Also, as you are starting to tighten this down and the pressure or the disc's a little loose, make sure you're kind of holding this flush so it gets a good feel, because when you're done, you should be able to slide this in and out of the disc and the pilot bearing without any resistance whatsoever, because if you have any resistance, you're going to have that same resistance when you try and put the transmission in. So want to make sure that is good to go. All right, and I think I'm going to end this one here. Next on the list is going to be installing the transmission, bell housing, drive shaft, and all that fun stuff. And that's going to be pretty involved in itself, so I think this is a good stopping point. So if you like what you're seeing, you want to follow along, please hit like, please hit subscribe, please hit the notification bell. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the comment section below. I do review them. I will reply. I do have a second YouTube channel devoted to firearms. If that's something you're interested in, please check it out. There is a link in the description of this video. I also have a Rumble channel where I'm posting firearm content. If you're on Rumble, I'd appreciate if you head over there and follow my channel. It'd be greatly appreciated. There is a link in the description to that as well. I have some merch I'm selling, as I showed earlier in the video. There is a link in the description, as well as you probably see some items under this video. That being said, thank you very much for watching, and have a great day.